Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave,
on behalf of every father and every mother,
wings for freedom. On behalf
of our warriors, and paves the way for a new history.
Hello and welcome to Tochnyi Weekly, the show that gets behind the headlines to discuss the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We have a very busy show for you today. We will be sticking to the normal broadcast schedule, but first we have a special guest that's been brought by our colleague Jonathan. So chat, if you guys have any questions during the broadcast, feel free to type them in chat. And without any delay, I will go ahead and turn it over to Jonathan. Please do like and subscribe. Jonathan, over to you.
Thank you. We are really lucky today to be joined by Daria Rabinovich, a representative from the Ukrainian charity Helping to Leave, a charity which helps in the saving of Ukrainians from the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine and areas in free Ukraine which are experiencing significantly high areas of this conflict. Daria, welcome to Tochnyi. It's a privilege having you here.
Thank you so much. It's the privilege to be here.
Could you outline the work Helping to Leave does and how long your organization has been running?
Gladly. So just to clarify, we are an international project. We consist of two legal entities, Ukrainian and Czech, and it's important because we wouldn't be able to do our work on the temporary occupied territories of Ukraine if we only had the Ukrainian legal entity, but I'll get in more details when I tell you about how we evacuate people from the temporary occupied territories. We started at the beginning of the full-scale invasion as a Telegram chat. So it was just a bunch of people who cared, and we saw the need of the people to receive information quickly and to have clear information on what is happening. And we started coordinating this Telegram chat, and we started posting the information that people could really rely on. And because it was so chaotic, people didn't know what to do, so they came to us. And then from that, we grew and we started realizing that we could have a more personal approach to the people trying to evacuate. So we established a Telegram bot, and we found so many amazing volunteers who would help guide people, who would tell them where to go, where the pickup is going to be. And then from there, we started developing our efforts. And we registered both of our legal entities in 2022. The work that we do now is still a lot of evacuation, but we have grown and we have seen that just bringing people from point A to point B is not enough. So we started helping people find accommodation. We started helping people find jobs, because sometimes we are approached by people on the TOT and they tell us, we want to evacuate, but we don't know what we're going to do on the government-controlled Ukraine, and we're scared to leave. So we ask them, what if we helped you find a job or a house? Would you leave then? And then they say, yes, we'll gladly leave. And that's how our project of adaptation started. So we collaborate with a lot of NGOs on the ground, government bodies, trying to help people feel more integrated into Ukrainian society on the government-controlled Ukraine. So these are the two main pillars that we have: the evacuation from Kharkiv, Kherson regions, and also from the temporary occupied areas of Ukraine, and reintegration. And another important thing to add is that we also meet people who are leaving the TOTs at the Volyn humanitarian corridor. There is only one humanitarian corridor now. There's between Ukraine and Belarus, and there is no humanitarian corridors between Ukraine and Russia. So the only way for people to enter Ukraine from Russia or Belarus is in the Volyn Oblast, and that's where we have a little trailer and we meet people there. We register them for cash and so on and so forth, and provide them with tickets, further evacuation, adaptation services. Yeah, so this is a quick outline of what we do.
Wow, that's fascinating. So what began as a Telegram chat developed into an international organization. The humanitarian corridor you mentioned, do you find the Belarusian authorities reliable as a partner to work with? Could you maybe tell our audience what that's like?
Well, we wouldn't necessarily call Belarusian authorities our partner, but I would say that they're quite predictable. So we can tell people we know the amount of documents people need to have, and then we tell them. And then some people don't have Ukrainian passports on them because a lot of our beneficiaries have lost all of their belongings after the Kakhovka Dam destruction, including their passports. So we help them get a white passport in Belarus, for example, and then they get through the corridor. This is the least of our concerns, taking people from the temporary occupied territories.
Fascinating. Thank you, Daria. What is the core mission of Helping to Leave? And how has this core mission evolved since the full-scale invasion began?
So our core mission is very simple. We help Ukrainians affected by the war. We help them now, and the evolution was such. We first helped them only with information, then we started helping with evacuation, then we started helping with adaptation, and now we are growing our adaptation services. So we find partners who would help people enroll into universities or help them rent accommodation or help them find jobs. So we are trying to enlarge the scope of help that we provide to the people who were most affected by the war.
I see. Thank you. Could you give us an idea of how much time and work is involved in the return of each Ukrainian life that you bring to safety in free Ukraine?
So it really depends on where people are leaving from. And I think now is the good point to tell you how many people we have evacuated from the beginning of the full-scale invasion. So we have evacuated more than 80,000 people. And you can probably imagine that out of those 80,000, everybody has their special needs, their stories. And we try to be as individual with the people that we have as possible. So, if we're talking from Kharkiv and Kherson regions, it might take a day. You know, when there is a movements in the front line, we collaborate with the Kharkiv and Kherson Red Cross, and we coordinate the evacuations. So they drive there because only they have access close to the front line, and we receive the messages from the people or the calls that they want to leave, and then we coordinate with the Red Cross. It takes about a day. With leaving from the TOT, it's much more complicated, as you can imagine, because the shortest evacuation from the TOT would probably take now about 3 days. And the way that it goes is that people have to gather their belongings, prepare themselves. They have to make sure that there is nothing on their phones that would be problematic on Russian checkpoints, and so on and so forth. And then they travel through the temporary occupied areas of Ukraine. Then they have to travel through Russia, and then they travel through Belarus. And this is a long way. So the least amount of time is 3 days, but sometimes it takes months. Sometimes we have beneficiaries that say, oh, we are ready, we really want to go, we are ready to leave. And then they change their minds because it's very scary. And then we have to wait and double check with them and ask again if they maybe changed their minds again, and then it can last for months. We also had a case that lasted more than a year because a person was first doubting, then they broke their arm, then they had to stay at the hospital, and then it just prolonged the whole evacuation process.
So, from first contact to safe arrival, it could be perhaps a minimum of 3 months and up to a year. And during this time, these people, they're obviously vulnerable. They might be injured, like that person you just mentioned. So, it's the kind of stories that these people bring to free Ukraine back with. These must be quite unique to each person. What kind of supports do these can you offer these escapees upon their arrival?
It really depends. I forgot to mention one thing, and now that Dina popped up on the screen, I wanted to tell you a bit more. At the beginning of the full-scale invasion, we have helped more than 10,000 people cross from the occupied areas of Kharkiv into government-controlled Ukraine, and then it was really crazy times. So we have, because we were back then more coordinating information and trying to help people find a safe way out, we have established a humanitarian corridor that we saw that Russian soldiers on the checkpoints were letting people go through, and we organized columns of people, and we were so scared because we were not sure if Russians would start shooting at them, if they would realize that these are humanitarian columns. We were also afraid that from Ukrainian side, for the military, it might look weird that there is a huge column of people leaving. So we had to coordinate it, and for a couple of months we had this process where we would be meeting people who were leaving the occupied part of Kharkiv and the Pechenegi Dam, and that was also leaving the temporary occupied territories, but that was fast. They didn't need 3 days or 3 months or a year back then. It was way quicker. So it's shifting a lot. Now, back to your question, what kind of help we can provide? The stories are truly very, very different. They range from young people who were born in Donetsk or Luhansk or Crimea, the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, and they are born into families of pro-Russian Ukrainians, and their parents don't let them leave. They don't want to leave on government-controlled Ukraine. And then when those young people are turning 18, they want to go to government-controlled Ukraine, but they're very lost. They were kids, and now they're somewhat adults, but they're still very young, and they don't know what to do. So with them, we help them go to universities, we consult them on, or we send them to our partners like Crimea SOS, who help them, who guide them towards this education on the government-controlled Ukraine. We have elderly people who don't know where to live once they reach the government-controlled Ukraine, but they want to leave the TOT because they are not receiving medical help. We had so many cases that were devastating for the team of people dying on the temporary occupied territories of basic diseases that are manageable into the 21st century just because the Russian occupational authorities are not providing the medical help. So for those people, we help them find accommodation. We help them find proper, geriatric facilities where they would be receiving the help that they need. We also sometimes have cases of people being tortured on the temporary occupied territories. And when we manage to get those people out, we immediately try to send them to provide them with psychological support. We don't ourselves provide it, but we have reliable partners that we can go to, and we tell them in advance before people even arrive to government-controlled Ukraine, please be prepared. These people are coming. They will need your help. And then we help them with that. Sometimes we, as I said, help people find work. We had a case of a man who was a farmer his whole life, and then his farm got occupied, and he wanted to leave, but he said that he will not survive without working on the land. So we found him a job at a farm on government-controlled Ukraine. So the requests really vary.
Astonishing work. The demands on educators and carers, medical workers, must be significant. Thank you for. I mean,
they are. Sorry.
I find it. I think a lot of people will find this remarkable, Daria. That a lot of people in their working lives have different metrics of success. Your metric, the metric for helping to leave measures success, is in human lives. The 80,000 lives saved, each life with their own unique needs, be them children or adults. Individual people like that 19-year-old girl yesterday whose rescue was announced with Bring Kids Back QA. So I was going to ask you about this partnership, actually, the Bring Kids Back QA partnership. Is this a common partnership for helping to leave, or does your organization's work tend to be more independent?
I would say that we try to rely on partners as much as possible. We are very proud of working with Bring Kids Back UA. We think it's such an important initiative, and we're so happy that we managed to highlight our work through their platform, that they're highlighting the work that we do, and that we can collaborate and work together. We couldn't do what we're doing by ourselves. We have so many volunteers, independent volunteers, that are supporting us with the work that we do. We have the Red Cross, as I mentioned before. We have other organizations that we collaborate with, because the needs are so vast, and we don't want to, just to provide help and say, oh, we provided psychological support and have a psychologist hired that would spend an hour with a beneficiary, and then we put a tick in the box and say, okay, this is what we've done. We really try to go as much in depth as possible, and we wouldn't be able to do it as one organization. And that the organization that we work with, more than 20 organizations in government controlled Ukraine, and they're all amazing. They're all doing amazing jobs, from helping our beneficiaries with complex legal issues where, I don't know, children don't have their birth certificates, or parents, were divorced and whatnot. Like, there are so many complicated stories, to psychological support, to and so forth. So I would definitely not say that we are independent. We wouldn't be able to do the work that we do without our partners. And especially now, with the US funding freeze, we didn't stop our operations at all. We had to cut our salaries. Now we're back. Everything seems to have improved. But, for 3 months, we were so worried that we'd have to say no to the people that request our help. But we didn't have to do it, because the civil society in Ukraine is just so strong that we can really rely on each other.
So, wow, your organization, that your business is the survival and saving of human lives, yet you've had to cut your own salaries to ensure this work happens.
Yeah, it was a really tough situation also, because around 30% of the people that work for us are our ex-beneficiaries whose families we helped. So these are people who suffered from the war directly. Not that I think there are any Ukrainians now that didn't suffer from the war directly, but and yeah, we had to cut their salaries, and it was really painful, but we are back on track now, thankfully.
That's good to hear. Thank you, Daria. I have one more question before I hand it over to questions from our wonderful audience. Our viewers and listeners will know about the Russian war crimes known collectively as the human safari, committed in Kherson and other regions along the Dnipro and elsewhere in places like Sumy. So could you outline for our viewers and listeners what kind of risks do your volunteers and staff face when operating near or inside the temporarily occupied territories?
So the obvious risks are that near the temporary occupied territories are the human safari, as you mentioned. We are always so worried about the people who are working in the field, especially in Kherson region now, but also in Kharkiv. So I think it's important to highlight that we don't have any volunteers that are directly integrated into helping to leave systems. We have the CRM systems with the data from our beneficiaries. We have the call center and so on and so forth. We don't the chatbot. We don't have any volunteers that are on the TOT in Russia or in Belarus that have access to these systems, that are officially part of the helping to leave team, because it's just unsafe. We know that there is a risk of the police or whoever coming to their houses, seizing their laptops, their phones, and getting access to our bases, and we cannot have this risk. But of course, we have people who collaborate with us. We have drivers that we pay on the temporary occupied territories to drive our beneficiaries, and there is always a risk for them. Or we had back when we were evacuating people from Mariupol, but like mass evacuations, we still evacuate people from Mariupol. But back when it was possible to drive through Russian checkpoints, we had some drivers that were collaborating with us and other organizations killed by the Russian soldiers. There's always this fear that the people who are working with us, who are helping people leave the temporary occupied territories, will be seized by Russians, tortured, put to prisons. But luckily, we have recently, as of like for the past year, we were very safe and secure with our operations, and nobody from the people who collaborate with us got hurt or had any harm caused. But yeah, obviously Russians don't like what we're doing, and they would probably, if they knew, they would cause harm to the people who collaborate with us.
Thank you, Daria. Thank you for bringing these stories to us and articulating them with commendable composure. We're going to just hand over some questions from the audience here. First up from Alan, who's asking, do Russian authorities try to prevent draftable people from leaving?
Yes, it's even worse. Russian authorities are drafting Ukrainians on the temporary occupied territories into Russian army. So not only do they try to prevent draftable people from leaving, they also try to keep them and put them into their own army. We have had a case recently where a man has approached us and said that he getting paper from the Russian army, and we managed to help him escape. Yeah, it's a very it's a very big problem now. I mean, and has been for the past couple of months.
Thank you. Another question from, I think I just lost it there. Oh, there we go. What are the main struggles, challenges for your group? I know you've touched upon some of these. In fact, I did have a seventh question, which was I kind of missed out. Sorry, but it's kind of related to this. The similar theme. The main challenges, struggles for your group, and have these changed over time? And has some things got easier or more challenging?
Well, the biggest and the most obvious challenge is money. We are always looking for funds. It's getting more and more expensive because there are different ways of getting people out of the TOT. There's like more direct ways that are cheaper, but that are more unsafe. So for a man who received the drafting papers, it wouldn't work. So the price of his evacuation, is multiplied by 10. Because we need to take him away around all those more obvious routes. Another challenge that I feel like we have overcome or almost overcome is extreme overwork of our team, because people would never be off, that they would be online all the time. And it was not only concerning the people on the ground or volunteers that are directly talking to the beneficiaries, it would also concern the people who are writing reports for grants, or the finance team who has to make sure that the payments went through, or the legal team that has to make sure that the documents are all in order. But I feel like now that some time has passed, we have established some the processes that we can streamline. This is going down, and we have overcome the challenge of overworking, or at least somewhat overcome it. And I think and the one that we don't expect to is, just digesting the stories that we hear. When we hear of our beneficiaries being tortured, when people come to us with no teeth because Russian soldiers have removed them, it's very difficult. It takes a lot of time to come back to everyday life after hearing that. So I would say hearing the stories of our beneficiaries is still the most challenging, but also the most rewarding part of our work, because we hear the stories and we're so happy that they are told and that we have managed to get this person out so that their story will be heard.
Thank you, Daria, and for your organizations. Thank you for the life that you give these Ukrainian victims. Thank you. If you have, thank you. If to our audience, if you have any final questions for Daria, please do feel free to put them into the chat. And of course, if you feel so inclined, the place to donate to Helping to Leave is on their website, which you can see in front of you here, helpingtoleave.org/en if your first language is English. And they've also got a place to donate, a place to contact them, and merchandise as well, if you would like to advocate their work through wearing some of their merchandise. So a question here from Marino. How did you form your team? How did you get together?
So there was a group of friends that was in Tbilisi, and they felt really powerless, and they came together. And some of those people are no longer with Helping to Leave. So the founder of Helping to Leave, for example, is no longer with Helping to Leave. But this group of friends started the organization, and then it grew. And I don't know, we somehow just attract like-minded people. So sometimes it's the friends of friends who hear about the work that we do. Sometimes it's our ex-beneficiaries, or I don't know if I can call them ex-beneficiaries, like the people that we help. There's the word of mouth, promotes our work, like a blogger promotes our work, or a platform like this one, and then people reach out to us and they ask if they can help us, and then we find, most of the time we find something for them to do.
Incredible. Thank you so very much for joining us today, Daria. It's been an absolute privilege having you here. Thank you for the work that your team does in Ukraine. Is there anything I may have missed?
Yeah, the last question that you sent me about what our goals are for the next year. If I can quickly answer that one, I'll be
Sorry,
happy to.
please do. Please do.
Thank you. So, because when we help people, we also record their feedback and then we analyze it because we want to make sure that we stay on top of the humanitarian needs. And we have established a huge need for temporary accommodation for the elderly, but also for everyone who is leaving the TOT because people have lived under the occupation for 3 or more years. And we and they feel really lost when they come to government controlled Ukraine, so we are planning to open our own shelter this coming year. Hopefully that works out. So this is our dream and our big plan.
Thank you. There's a clear need for people to help your organization in everywhere all over the world. So thank you very much indeed, Daria. It's been wonderful having you here. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
I'll hand over to Joseph.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yes, thank you very much, Daria. And that's Daria with Helping to Leave. Please go check out their website. It's a great organization. We really encourage you guys to visit and check them out. And yeah, Daria, you're more than welcome to stay. Yeah, we might have some questions in chat, but we'll go ahead and move to the next segment, which I believe is my news report. So we'll go ahead and start with that. These are the main headlines as of August 3rd, 2025. First up, we have operations. Overnight on August 2nd, multiple regions in Russia experienced a wave of drone activity that resulted in explosions and fires at various industrial and strategic sites. In Samara Oblast, the governor confirmed incidents in Novokubishevsk, where video evidence from social media showed a significant blaze at a facility resembling Novokubishevsk oil refinery. The footage also captured the distinct sounds associated with drone flight and air defense responses. Local authorities implemented a temporary shutdown of mobile internet services and halted operations at Samara's airport. In Penza Oblast, drones reportedly targeted facilities tied to the military-industrial sector. One of the impacted sites was identified as JSC Production Association Elektropribor, a company involved in manufacturing guidance and communication components for Russian missile systems. Another nearby plant known for producing command centers used in air defense infrastructure was also believed to have sustained damage. In Ryazan Oblast, residents near the Diaghilevo airport reported hearing intense blasts. An oil facility in Ryazan was also allegedly struck, with eyewitness video showing a substantial fire. While regional officials confirmed that drones had impacted an enterprise in the area, they withheld details about the exact location or nature of the target. Residents in Lipetsk and Voronezh Oblasts also reported aerial threats and the activation of air defense systems during the night, part of a sequence of similar drone-related incidents across occupied Crimea, which took place the previous night and led to a temporary shutdown of the Crimean bridge to vehicle traffic. The Kubyshev oil refinery is a key supplier of fuels such as the Euro 5 standard gasoline and diesel, in addition to a broad portfolio of other refined petroleum products commonly used in commercial markets. During the night of July 29th, Ukrainian aerial systems carried out a coordinated operation targeting logistical and energy infrastructure deep within Russian-controlled territory. A key target was the railway junction in Salsk, located in Rostov Oblast, approximately 250 kilometers from the front lines. The strike resulted in a major fire that temporarily halted rail operations, disrupted civilian and military transport, and caused significant delays across the regional railway network. Eyewitness accounts and local sources indicated that the assault involved multiple drones, with some being engaged by Russian forces using small arms. Explosions rocked the area, followed by a large fire at the Salsk station. Reports confirmed damage to 2 fuel tankers and a locomotive, with visual evidence showing flames engulfing parts of the station, including a rail car transporting what appeared to be military equipment. The incident severely impacted rail operations. Overhead electrical lines were damaged, and at least 2 passenger train cars sustained window damage. Passengers aboard a long-distance train described momentary chaos, but reported that no one was physically harmed. Service through the station was suspended for several hours, and emergency personnel were deployed to control the situation. Russian railways reported delays to at least 9 long-distance trains before announcing a partial resumption of services. Another target that night was the Orlovsky train substation, approximately 400 kilometers from the front. Footage released by Ukrainian sources showed the site engulfed in flames, indicating that the facility, which is vital to the regional rail power supply, was successfully impacted. The governor of Rostov Oblast confirmed that multiple areas were affected by drone activity. The operation left large areas, including parts of occupied Donetsk Oblast, without power and caused significant delays and disruption across southern Russia's transport infrastructure. On July 29th, Ukraine's military intelligence agency released footage documenting the country's initial use of FPV drones in naval operations, marking a notable development in their maritime warfare capabilities. The video captures an operation carried out on September 11, 2024, off the coast of Russian-occupied Crimea, targeting a fortified gas production platform that had been converted into a military installation. The mission involved Ukraine's Raven Group deploying FPV drones from vessels operating in open waters. These drones were remotely piloted and equipped for precision strikes and were directed at Russian positions on the Petro-Hodovolets platform in the Black Sea. Ukrainian intelligence reported that the drones effectively neutralized threats on the platform, inflicting personnel and equipment losses, although exact figures were not disclosed. The Petro-Hodovolets site had previously been seized and repurposed by Russian forces for military functions, including surveillance and logistics. Despite Ukrainian claims of reclaiming the installation as of September 2023, the recorded footage confirmed ongoing Russian use of the site a year later, indicating persistent contestation over the marine positions in the region. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion in 2022, Russia has transformed various offshore infrastructure points such as oil and gas platforms into defensive and operational outposts. Ukraine's use of FPV drones is part of an evolving strategy aimed at undermining these fortified positions. Yeah, I haven't heard a lot about these in a long time. I remember back in 2022 and 2023 a little bit. This was talked about, but it was about special forces actually landing on these platforms and things like that. So it seems like maybe an evolution of the operations that have been going on there for some time. On the night of July 28th, Ukrainian special forces executed a targeted amphibious operation on the Tendrivska Spit, a narrow stretch of land in the Black Sea under Russian control near occupied Kherson. The mission resulted in the elimination of the stationed Russian unit, with Ukrainian forces reportedly completing the assault without taking any losses. The Tendrivska Spit, although geographically unremarkable, holds strategic significance due to its role as an electronic surveillance and countermeasure outpost for Russia. Russian forces had established an electronic warfare base there, which included a Zond jamming system and a ROSA radar installation. These systems provided Russian units with monitoring capabilities over a large portion of the northern Black Sea. Ukrainian military intelligence confirmed both systems were neutralized during the operation alongside the personnel operating them. This location has been the focus of frequent skirmishes in recent months, as it lies in contested waters. The operation was said to have been made possible by small boats acquired through a civilian-funded program called Boats for Hur, coordinated by the Diana Podolyanchuk Charitable Foundation. The vessels were used to transport Ukrainian special forces to the target site. Two hacker collectives, Silent Crow and the Belarusian cyber guerrillas, conducted a large-scale cyber attack targeting the internal systems of Russia's flagship airline, Aeroflot. The groups claim to have fully compromised and dismantled the airline's IT infrastructure, extracting and wiping critical databases, including the complete set of personal data for all individuals who have ever flown with the carrier. According to their statement, the hackers accessed and downloaded the entirety of Aeroflot's flight history archives, infiltrated essential corporate systems, and gained remote control over employee devices, including those used by top executives. They also report seizing sensitive materials from internal surveillance systems as well as audio and communication intercepts. The total volume of exfiltrated data reportedly includes 12 terabytes of structured databases, 8 terabytes of file shares, and 2 terabytes of internal corporate email. The groups assert that the scale of the damage is such that system recovery would require an extensive financial and technical effort, estimating losses in the tens of millions of dollars. They frame the operation as a deliberate message to individuals within the Russian state apparatus, asserting that their digital platforms are neither secure nor undetectable. In the aftermath of the breach, Aeroflot acknowledged disruptions to its information systems. A statement on its Telegram channel indicated that the issues would affect the airline's operations, including flight schedule changes, postponements, and cancellations. By Monday, roughly 50 domestic flights originating from Moscow had been canceled, with disruptions reported across multiple routes. The hackers signaled plans to release portions of the acquired data in the near future and frame the incident as part of a broader campaign aligned with Ukrainian and Belarusian resistance efforts. Up next, we have economy and aid. The United States and NATO are moving forward with the development of a new financial infrastructure designed to enable NATO members to collectively fund American weapons transfers to Ukraine. The system is being built in response to U.S. President Trump's increased dissatisfaction with Russia's ongoing military campaign and the perceived lack of progress in resolving the war. While Trump initially approached Moscow with an eye toward de-escalation, his administration is now threatening economic penalties, including tariffs, should there be no significant movement by August 8th. The proposed financing model centers on the Priority Ukraine Requirements List, a structured catalog outlining U.S. weapon systems prioritized by Ukraine. Under this system, Ukraine would organize its military needs into tranches of approximately $500 million US. NATO member states, under the coordination of Secretary General Mark Rutte, would then decide how to divide financial responsibility for items within each tranche. A European official involved in the process described the goal of securing up to $10 billion US in military aid as ambitious but necessary, and stated that the alliance is actively working toward that benchmark. The framework is described as a voluntary but coordinated effort under NATO's umbrella, encouraging participation from all member states. A key element of the initiative involves the creation of a NATO-managed holding account, where allies can contribute funds earmarked for weapon purchases. These contributions would then be transferred, potentially to the U.S. Treasury or a separate escrow fund, after review and approval by NATO's senior military leadership. The final structure of the financial pathways is still being finalized. The mechanism also offers an advantage for NATO countries that choose to send arms directly. It allows them to bypass the often time-consuming U.S. arms export approval process when restocking their own inventories. This dual-track approach is intended to work in parallel with the U.S. Presidential Drawdown Authority, which permits direct transfers of existing American stockpiles to allied nations in urgent situations. At least one tranche of arms is already being negotiated under this new arrangement, although it's not yet clear whether any money has actually changed hands. Meanwhile, U.S. lawmakers have introduced the Peace Act, a bill that would formalize a Treasury-managed fund to hold foreign contributions intended to replenish U.S. arms provided to Ukraine. This new mechanism would represent a significant shift in how NATO coordinates large-scale defense support, aiming to streamline funding logistics while expanding collective responsibility for sustaining Ukraine's military capabilities. Raytheon Technologies has secured a $3.5 billion contract from the U.S. Department of Defense to manufacture Advanced Medium-Range Air-to-Air Missiles, or AMRAAM, along with associated systems and support components. Ukraine is listed among the foreign countries set to receive these missiles through the Foreign Military Sales Program. The contract covers a wide scope of deliverables, including missile production, telemetry systems, spare parts for initial deployment and field operations, as well as production engineering support. The effort is part of a broader initiative to bolster the air combat capabilities of allies and partner nations. In addition to Ukraine, the list of recipients includes NATO and Indo-Pacific allies such as Denmark, Belgium, Japan, the Netherlands, Canada, Finland, Germany, Hungary, Spain, Poland, Sweden, Taiwan, Lithuania, the UK, Australia, Switzerland, Israel, and Kuwait. The production will be handled by Raytheon's division in Tucson, Arizona, with the project scheduled for completion by the third quarter of the fiscal year 2031. The AMRAAM system is a key component of modern air combat arsenals. It is compatible with a variety of NATO standard aircraft and air defense platforms, offering Ukraine and partner nations increased interoperability and operational flexibility. Ukrainian state gas company Naftogaz has entered into its first gas supply agreement with SOCAR Energy Ukraine, a subsidiary of Azerbaijan's SOCAR Group, marking a strategic shift in Ukraine's energy sourcing. This initial shipment, while modest in volume, is being transported via the Trans-Balkan Corridor, utilizing the Bulgaria-Romania pipeline route for the first time in such a capacity. Naftogaz leadership emphasized the significance of the agreement, describing it as a foundational step toward long-term energy cooperation with Azerbaijan. The deal aligns with ongoing initiatives aimed at enhancing Ukraine's energy resilience and securing alternative gas sources ahead of the 2025-2026 heating season. Along with this agreement, Naftogaz has strengthened its financial position through recent loan arrangements. The company secured 4.7 billion hryvnia from Ukrgas Bank, earmarked for gas procurement and storage buildup. A similar loan of the same amount was also finalized with Privatbank. These funds will support the accumulation of natural gas reserves and underground storage facilities to ensure sufficient supply during peak demand periods. The High Court in London has ruled that former Privatbank owners Ihor Kolomoisky and Gennady Bogolyubov orchestrated the misappropriation of nearly $2 billion from the bank through a complex refinancing scheme designed to benefit them personally. The judgment is based on extensive evidence provided by Privatbank and concluded that both individuals were directly involved in the financial misconduct, dismissing their denials as dishonest. The court determined that Kolomoisky exhibited behavior suggesting that he viewed himself as both exempt from legal accountability, while Bogolyubov relied on deceptive documentation. Both men declined to testify during the trial held in 2023, a decision the judge interpreted as an attempt to avoid scrutiny over their role in the alleged fraud. During this period, Kolomoisky was held under temporary arrest in Ukraine. Although the exact amount they must repay is still being finalized, the court upheld all of Privatbank's claims, indicating that the former owners would likely be liable for more than $1.7 billion, excluding interest. Once the interest and legal costs are included, the total obligation is expected to surpass $2 billion. Privatbank's legal team, led by Hogan Lovells partner Richard Lewis, described the trial as one of the most technically demanding to have occurred in the English judicial system, involving voluminous evidence to trace the diversion of bank funds. Ukraine's Prime Minister, Yulia Sverdenko, praised the ruling as a significant legal and political milestone, calling it a demonstration of the state's capacity to assert and defend its financial interests on the global stage. At least 4 tankers carrying Russian crude oil are currently idling off of India's western coastline, delayed by rising international pressure and tightening sanctions enforcement. According to NDTV Profit, the vessels, 2 of which, the Achilles and the Elite, are anchored near the port of Jamnagar, were initially scheduled to dock at the nearby Sika terminal but have yet to offload their cargo. These tankers were loaded with Urals-grade crude from Russian ports in Primorsk and Ust-Luga and are under European Union and UK sanctions. 2 additional tankers, the Destan and the Hore, are also waiting offshore. While the Destan is also under sanctions, the Hore has not been sanctioned so far. The delays coincide with escalating U.S. pressure. President Donald Trump has issued a firm ultimatum, stating that any nation continuing to import Russian energy beyond August 8th could face 100% tariffs. The warning was originally framed as a 50-day deadline, but was suddenly shortened to 10 days amid Trump's growing frustration over continued Russian attacks on Ukrainian cities. His administration has accused Moscow of maintaining cordial diplomatic overtures while intensifying the military campaign. Following these developments, Indian government authorities have reportedly instructed state-owned refiners to develop alternative sourcing strategies. This includes identifying crude supply options from the Middle East and West Africa to mitigate potential disruptions. Bloomberg reported that 4 state-run Indian refiners, collectively responsible for more than half of the national refining output, have already suspended further purchases of Russian oil. Despite the shift in public sector behavior, private Indian refiners such as Reliance Industries and Nayara Energy continue to import Russian crude. Nayara remains partly owned by Russian state oil firm Rosneft, placing it outside the policy scope of Indian government directives, at least for now. Up next, we have international relations. On August 1st, President Donald Trump ordered the deployment of 2 U.S. nuclear submarines to undisclosed strategic locations in response to remarks made by former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev on Twitter, which Trump described as dangerously provocative. The decision marks a sharp escalation in U.S.-Russia tensions amid the ongoing invasion of Ukraine. Trump announced the move via a statement on Truth Social, indicating that the submarines were repositioned as a precaution in case Medvedev's comments were intended as more than rhetorical. Trump emphasized the potential consequences of inflammatory language, suggesting that miscalculations could lead to unintended escalation between nuclear-armed states. Medvedev's statements, which were delivered on July 31st, referenced Russia's Cold War-era automated nuclear retaliation system, implying that any perceived threat or ultimatum from the U.S. could trigger catastrophic consequences. His remarks came shortly after Trump issued a direct warning, telling him to be cautious with his language and tone. The exchange followed Trump's latest ultimatum to Moscow, demanding measurable steps towards ending its invasion of Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has posthumously awarded journalist Victoria Roshchina the Order of Freedom, recognizing her commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty, civil liberties, and democratic values. Roshchina disappeared on August 3, 2023, in territory under temporary Russian occupation. Her whereabouts remained unknown for months until Russian authorities confirmed in May 2024 that she was being held. This is not her first encounter with Russian captivity. She had previously been detained in March of 2022 and released after 10 days. Her death was confirmed in October of 2024 following a formal notification from Russian officials to her father. Ukrainian authorities later verified the information. According to the Media Initiative for Human Rights, Roshchina was held in multiple facilities during her captivity, including Correctional Colony No. 77 in Berdyansk and Detention Center No. 2 in Taganrog. The latter is known for its severe conditions and mistreatment of Ukrainian detainees. Evidence of her suffering was later detailed by a former cellmate who reported visible scars, knife wounds, and signs of severe abuse, including electric shocks. The journalist's physical condition deteriorated rapidly in custody. She refused food and was said to weigh around 30 kilograms at the time of her death. Her remains were returned to Ukraine in February 2025, though the information was not made public until late April. And last item this week, on July 31st, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky signed into law a bill that reinstates the independence of the country's two key anti-corruption agencies, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau and the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, NABU and SAPO, respectively. The law, which was passed during a live-stream session of the Verkhovna Rada, received overwhelming support, with 331 lawmakers voting in favor and none opposing it. It was published on the same day in the official parliamentary outlet Holos Ukraini, meaning it came into force as of August 1st. This legislative reversal comes just days after the parliament, with backing from Zelensky's political party, had passed and enacted a prior law on July 22nd that significantly undermined the autonomy of NABU and SAPO. The move drew strong domestic protests and criticism from Ukraine's Western partners, prompting a swift political and legislative response. Facing backlash, Zelensky introduced a new bill just 2 days later, aimed at undoing the damage and reaffirming the agency's operational independence. Upon signing the corrective legislation, Zelensky thanked Parliament for its support and emphasized that the new law ensures anti-corruption institutions and law enforcement agencies can function independently and properly. The quick pivot was welcomed by Ukraine's civil society watchdogs, including the Anti-Corruption Action Center, which described the law as a restoration of critical oversight principles that had been stripped away by the earlier legislation. International reactions also indicate a cautious approval. Guillaume Mercer, a spokesperson for EU enlargement, acknowledged that the measure restores core protections for NABU and SAPO, but noted that the final text needs to still be reviewed. He added that the European Union expects Ukraine to honor its commitments to anti-corruption reform and to take further action in strengthening the rule of law. If you want a more in-depth discussion of the original law, you can take a look at our broadcast last week. This reversal reflects the high stakes for Ukraine's credibility among international partners and its broader efforts to meet governance standards tied to EU integration and ongoing foreign assistance. And that's it for the main items this week. We will now move to the next.
Yeah, and the next segment would be me. Hello, guys. As always, I will now present this week's most important news from Germany regarding Ukraine. We are starting with a donation jointly financed by the German government and the European Union. At least 3 Volkswagen Amarok vehicles have been handed over, which will now be used by the Soloriv, Derhatchi, Kupiansk, and Chuhuiv communities in the Kharkiv region for rapid response tasks after Russian shelling. And very good news. On Friday, the German MOD, the German Ministry of Defense, announced that Germany will deliver 2 additional Patriot fire units from Bundeswehr stocks to Ukraine. The first launchers will be handed over in the following days, while the remaining components of the 2 fire units will be handed over in the next 2 to 3 months, so until the end of the year. Very, very good news. And yeah, that's it for my segment. Very short this week. Back to you, Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Germanade. Erlen, I'm going to ask you, should we have Gesh go now, or should we have Stanimir go now?
To be early out, so I guess we should give the word to Stanimir.
Okay, sounds good. So, Mr. Stanimir, before you do your general report, I guess we wanted to ask about a few things. The first, of course, is the Aeroflot hack. I mentioned kind of the key details from sort of the Ukrainian side, or what the Belarusian group and the other hacker group reported they accomplished. But if you had any information about the Russian side, how it's been covered in their media and so forth, that'd be maybe interesting for the audience.
Yeah, so one of the things that the Russian media covered is that actually the IT infrastructure of Aeroflot was also protected with a contract from a company for IT security that had direct ties to the FSB. So they're sleeping on the job again, which is usual for them, it seems. Also, the disruptions seem to have been concentrated around their operations from Sheremetyevo. The other airports weren't disrupted, but this airport saw 2 days of disruptions. when it comes to flights coming out of it, you mentioned 2030. I think it was 100 flights in the first day, and a similar number of flights coming in and out of Sheremetyevo for the second day. And on the third day, they managed to stabilize their operations. But initially, they weren't even able to refuel planes on the ground. That was the extent of the damage, at least for that hub, for that airport.
And in addition to the hack, there have been continued disruptions at Russian airports. Any news about that this week?
Yeah, right now today there were over 50 flights delayed because two main airports were impacted. The first one was in Sochi for several hours, and the second one was St. Petersburg's Pulkovo for several hours. So we're talking 20, 30 flights delayed from both airports coming out. And again, if a flight is going to those airports, it's going to be diverted to reserve airports. And like I said, for Russia, a reserve airport could be as far away as 700 kilometers. So you could be landing in Moscow instead of St. Petersburg. But this is just the new normal for them right now. Today wasn't as bad as the previous weekend. We're seeing this as a daily occurrence now with airports being shut down due to drone attacks.
And there was a little bit of news. I mean, you've been following this for a while, but it sounds like the extremism law was like actually put into effect this week, or like earlier this week. Is that correct?
Yes, as part of a series of laws that it was signed this week, along with the traffic law, which was brought up for amendment. It's very much in force. So from September 1st, I expect people to get arrested not arrested, but fined for looking for extremist content. And then maybe it will replace the most notorious law right now in Russia, which is the 228, which is drug possession. Because Russian police have a tendency to carry drugs with them to place on people.
Yeah, well, thanks, Stanimir. I think that's all the questions I had for you this week. If you want to talk about your general report for the Russian economy, I'm sure the audience will be interested.
Yeah, so first I'll start off with something that came out on the 1st. We have the PMI data from S&P for Russia, at least for the manufacturing. And it's again a contraction of 47 points. So when it comes to PMI, values above 50 points mean expansion, values below 50 points mean contraction. This is the second contraction in a row. In June, it was 47.5 points. In the previous one was in March 2025. The current one from July at 47 points is the worst since March 2022. Also, this week we had the continuation of the price fixing endeavor by the Russian Ministry of Agriculture. It's not exactly price fixing, it's an attempt by the Russian ministry to set guidelines for contracts for major agricultural goods for supermarkets. So they want 80% of the goods that are being sold in supermarket chains to be sourced with long-term contracts, which means that the agricultural producer will have to settle for a year-long contract with only one revisal point. So if the prices and the costs increase, he has only one time to change the price without resorting to a court procedure. And the other option is for the long-term contracts to actually have a minimum and maximum point calculated by a committee from the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Industry and Trade, and unions of the different agricultural companies. So the Union of Milk Producers, the Union of Grain Producers, and so on. And initially, it seems that everyone hates this, apart from the Russian government. All the producers are against it because it's going to stiffen, it's going to make it very hard for them to adjust to costs. And that's something they've had to do over and over for the last 3 years due to rising costs and rising inflation. So they don't want to be stuck in contracts where they can't renegotiate the price without going to court. And that's the only way it seems in this version of the proposal that the Russian Ministry of Agriculture is having. So additionally, the Russian federal government will write off 160 billion rubles of regional debt given out in 2024. And for 2025 to 2029, it's going to write off 1.1 trillion rubles of Russian regional debt. So for now, the Russian regions can ramp up a bit of debt, except for the worst cases where they've, like Kemerovo region, which has had to rely on banks for additional debt funding. But for most regions, that would be enough to cover their deficits for the next 3 years. Also, when it comes to the Russian automotive industry, we got some more news from this week. The Liaz bus manufacturing company is going to go into a 4-day work week. So we have another major automotive producer going into a 4-day work week. We also saw that KAMAZ released its figures for the first half of 2025, and they have a 20.8 billion ruble loss for the first half of the year. Also, their revenue decreased 18% to 128 billion rubles. So they're suffering significantly. And this is why this week Russia banned 4 Chinese imported trucks, 4 models. These made up 25% of the sales of trucks in Russia, so they were a major competitor for KAMAZ. However, it's not exactly straightforward because the claim is that they didn't meet Russian requirements, and that is partially true, even though Russia usually gives waivers for those. But in this case, they were registered in other countries from the Eurasian Economic Union. So you can get a certificate from another country of the Eurasian Economic Union, and that certificate is valid for imports into Russia. So Russia took it onto themselves to officially ban these specific trucks that were getting such a big market share. They weren't officially allowed to travel on Russian roads by a Russian authority, but the Russian authority should have honored that certification. Another big story this week is that we saw Sberbank's own German Gref go to Putin to complain about bank regulations and basically to talk behind the back of Nabiullina to Putin that the central bank is making mortgages unprofitable for banks, which is actually not true. Even though Sberbank's profits haven't matched inflation when it comes to increases, they've increased this year by a few percent compared to last year, and last year was a record profit year for Russian banks. The issues that he's talking about is the macroprudential measures that the Russian central bank imposed on the banking sector, because it turns out that the majority of their repeat clients were people who had 50 to 80% of their official income being spent on servicing existing multiple debts. So multiple loans. These were people who had 2 or 3 loans or maybe 4 loans who were taking out an additional one, which is a mortgage. And the Russian central bank actually forbade the banks from issuing additional debt to such customers. And that collapsed part of their mortgage issuing business. So in this case, I would say that the Russian central bank is right to be looking out for Russians not going into too much debt and the quality of the Russian banking customers deteriorating significantly. However, it seems that Sberbank has a different issue in this case, because not only is it lending people money for mortgages, it's also lending construction companies so they can start projects. And it's trying to reduce the rates and reduce the restrictions on mortgages so that they can issue more mortgages so that the construction companies that have borrowed money from Sberbank don't go bankrupt. But again, I think in this case, the Russian central bank is in the right. At least it's looking out for the Russian consumer and the quality of the Russian banking clients. Additionally, Sberbank lowered its estimate for lending growth in 2025. It lowered the retail segment from 5% to 0%, so no growth in the retail lending is expected by them. And also, it lowered its estimates for the corporate lending from 9 to 11% growth to 7 to 9% growth. Another big story from this week was that Raiffeisen Bank published its, the Russian subsidiary of Raiffeisen Bank published its Q2 2025 results. And it had an 861 million euro loss because it was forced to set up reserves for the 1.2 billion euros that the Russian court ordered it to pay Rasperia for purchase of a share of the Austrian construction company Strabag. and the court actually freezed before that 2 billion euros from the Raiffeisen accounts it had with its central bank. So this is a long story, but basically Raiffeisen Bank wanted to buy from sanctioned Russian entities share in the Austrian construction company Strabag from a company that's called Rasperia. Initially, that company was owned by, I think, Deripaska, but afterwards he managed to sell his company to another Russian entity, but that entity decided to go to court against Raiffeisen Bank in Russia and force it to buy the share of the company and hand them over the 2 billion euros that the stake was valued at. So Raiffeisen Bank, via staying in Russia, managed to incur a 2 billion loss to its shareholders. One of those, you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes cases. Finally, from the banking news, we have data that by July 2025, 12.5 million Russians have banned themselves from taking out loans. This is done because there are schemes in Russia where basically you're scammed into taking out a loan for yourself, but you transfer immediately the money to the scammer. And because Russia can't actually fight scammers efficiently, it's opting out to giving people the option to ban themselves from taking out loans. 13,760,000 people have had requests to be banned from taking out loans, and 730,000 people have requested to lift their ban once it has been imposed. When it comes to commodities, we have news when it comes to metals. So Russian copper exports to China for the first half of 2025 were up 81%. This is primarily due to the removal of Russian export duties on copper that they had internally, and also the introduction of US tariffs of 50%, which is why China started sourcing more of its copper from Russia. When it comes to oil and gas, we have the complete ban of gasoline exports from Russia. This is because the A95 gasoline wholesale price was heading towards 80,000 rubles due to insufficient supplies on the domestic market. Like I said before, Russian refineries and large gasoline producers could export, even though smaller producers couldn't, and they increased their exports in the first half of 2025, which led to a shortage on the domestic wholesale market and a problem for the Russian independent gas station chains. That is, they're not linked to the major oil companies. So this ban should reduce some of the stress and start lowering the wholesale price of gasoline over the next few weeks. Also, Russia via Turkey and the Turkish stream managed to deliver a record 1.59 billion cubic meters of gas to Europe. This is to their usual buyers in Europe, so Serbia, Hungary, that sort of thing. This was 41% higher than the July 2024 deliveries via Turkish stream. And for the first half of 2025, the growth was only 6.9%. So they're ramping up from July of this year and increasing their deliveries. Now, for some data for the end of the first half of 2025 for the financials of major Russian oil and gas companies. So Gazprom released its accounting figures using the Russian accounting standard for the first half of 2025. And they had just 10 billion and 760 million rubles in loss compared to 480.9 billion rubles for the first half of 2025. Revenue rose by 4.2% to 3.05 trillion rubles. However, I have to point out that because this is under the Russian accounting standards, they don't include all of their revenue streams and they don't include all of their profits. So they focus only on the gas side of the business in this case. So none of the production and additional power facilities that they run. So expect this to come out to probably a profit for the first half of 2025 when they're released under international accounting standards. The net profit of Tatneft, which is Tatarstan's own oil company, also decreased from 118.49 billion rubles to 66.7 billion rubles. Its revenue also decreased from 674 billion rubles by 10%. And again, this is data according to the Russian accounting standards, so expect some differences when they release in a month or so the data using the international accounting standards. And finally, Novatek saw its net profit decreased by 15% using the international accounting standards, but under the Russian accounting standards, it was a further drop by 75% to just 26 billion rubles in profit. Again, the company includes different things in the different accounting standards, so you should look for the financial result that comes out later, and that's the one that's going to have more information on it and a complete view of all the operations of the company. Have that in mind when you're looking at statistics. Transneft was the final one that released this week. It operates Russia's pipelines. And for the first half of 2025, its net profit rose 40% to 76.3 billion rubles. Revenue was 637.7 billion rubles. However, this means that there's going to be more money for the Russian budget because they raised the taxes on the profit of Transneft from 20% to 40% last year. Now, for some interesting data points, Russian car dealerships are expected to decrease by 10 to 20% in 2025. So far in Q2 2025, the number of dealerships decreased by 137 to 2,950 dealerships. And the number of dealership contracts decreased by 183 to 4,330 contracts. Also, Russian wholesale chicken meat prices went up by 18%. And in some cases, for specific parts of chicken, we saw that prices went up by 40%. This is due to the number of people who are switching away from pork because it's gone up 49% over the last year, and also due to the growth of chicken exports by 22%. And the final interesting data point that I collected this week was that it seems that after the nationalization of Moscow's Domodedovo airport, people have stopped receiving salaries on time, and the official salary has been decreased to 20% what it is, and the rest is now paid out as bonuses, which you have to earn. So this is one of the draconian measures they're doing after they nationalized the airport to reduce its cost because it's facing 70 billion rubles in debt and is going to have to make payments of 8 billion rubles this year alone. Finally, for inflation and debt this week, Russia again recorded a decrease in prices. There was a deflation for the last week from the 22nd to the 28th of July of 0.05%. So inflation for July stood at 0.71%, and inflation for the year up to that point at 4.51%. Russia held two auctions for debt, the Ministry of Finance, that is. The first one raked in 185.7 billion rubles of debt at a yield of 14.36%. And the second auction, again, was smaller with a much lower yield. They managed to sell 30.1 billion rubles of debt at a yield of 13.65%. This is the lowest the yield has been so far in 2025. And one last thing that I forgot to mention in the major news is that we're seeing the effects of the Russian Ministry of Agriculture and its ban on the imports of seeds from the Western world. After February 2022, only one company that produces specific seed for farmers internationally, that is, left the Russian market. So they were completely capable of buying better seeds for their crops. However, they were banned. And afterwards, the Russian Ministry of Agriculture introduced actually a quota system because they found out that Russia itself cannot sustain enough seed production and enough high quality seeds for the domestic demand. So they introduced a quota, but again, in Russian manner, they managed to give the quota to people who were linked to oil companies and had no experience in buying seeds, no experience in the business. They were from the oil transportation business, so that failed. And Russian farmers were forced to use Russian domestic seeds, and we've already seen that result in sugar beet production, which, despite a growth in the planted area of 10%, we saw the actual total production of sugar beets for 2024-2025 decrease by 21%. And we're going to expect to see grain production also fall by 30% due to similar reason. And that's it for me for this week.
Thank you, Stanimir. That was a very thorough report. So if you have any questions, chat, feel free to type them in. But I think Stanimir's got to get going, so maybe we'll answer them next week. But yeah, thanks again, Stanimir. And up next, we have a report from Mr. Gesh, I assume about some things going on the front line, or at least to do with the Russian military. So I will turn it over to you, sir.
Hello. I mean, I don't have anything specific prepared, but Alan asked me to give a quick overview, and so I thought, yeah, let's go over some stuff on the front line. And
I mean, you always have something there going on.
Yeah.
So quite a few things going on.
Okay, yeah. But I will open the map stream, and then we can take a look. And as always, where is it?
Has it been a busy week for you?
Of course. Let's look at.
I'm gonna full screen it.
Okay, great. Yeah. Once again, using the great map from Andrew. I mean, it's not focused on units, but I can show you here where stuff has changed and where the focus points of the Russian army have changed, and maybe also some general developments of the Russian army and of the Ukrainian army. There have also been some small changes or some changes there in the structure. Some general shift of focus points for the Russians have been observed over the last months. I've reported, I think already last time, that the Russians have moved people from this area down south to the push near Tochnyi and Redkotub. This push has since stalled heavily, and there are reports that the Ukrainians managed to retake a bit of the territory there. And but overall, this whole area has seen not that much movement compared to the first months of the, I can give you an overview. I don't know exactly, I can't remember exactly when it started, but you can see here between March, there was basically nothing, and it's 1st of March and 1st of June, basically, moved all up to Karpivka, and since the 1st of June and now the 1st of August, the whole movement has stalled heavily, and there's not that much expansion of the line of the Russian control. However, the areas that are quite a lot more critical for the Ukrainians right now are further south towards Pokrovsk and also, I mean, all around Kostiantynivka. So this is the goal for the Russians, and I mean both Pokrovsk and Kostiantynivka. The Russians have managed to push quite heavily in the east of Pokrovsk, and they have used, interestingly enough, the DPR brigades, namely the 1st, the 5th, the 9th, the 110th, and the Did I forget any? Yeah, and mainly those 4 brigades. They have moved them over from. I mean, a few months ago they've moved over the 5th and the 110th from Korokovo, and now in the last months they moved first the 1st and the 9th from Toretsk over to the area south of Pokrovsk, and now then to the area east of Pokrovsk. And with those 4 brigades, they are mainly conducting the push here. And now there are also reports that they moved over another brigade from Toretsk to this area, and they are quite heavily reinforcing this and trying to pressure Pokrovsk heavily from the east. And another huge problem for Pokrovsk is also not only the territorial changes, but also the changes in Russian tactics, or their capabilities. As most people know, or as a lot of people know, the Russian drone capabilities have increased heavily in the last months. Actually, they are now able to conduct way deeper strikes. I mean, obviously, in last year, the emergence of the Vandal drone, the fiber optic drone, has been a huge advancement of the Russians, and they have also since started to conduct deeper and deeper strikes. So basically, all the supply lines into Pokrovsk are now under fire by FPV drones, which, like, let's say it like this: a supply line is quite fast under fire by artillery. The thing is, artillery can never achieve the same effect as FPV drones, because FPV drones are so much cheaper. The positions of the operators are way easier to conceal. It's just they can be spread out way easier. Like an artillery piece, yes, you can actually often strike easier than find and strike UAV operators. So this is quite a huge problem, and there's actually often a more precise and drones are obviously also more precise than most artillery fire. So yes, this is a huge problem for the soldiers in Pokrovsk. There have also been Russian small Russian groups spotted within Pokrovsk itself, and so they've actually managed to bring in some DRGs. I mean, DRGs are what's this again?
Basically, groups infiltrating behind
exactly,
the enemy
infiltrating
lines.
troops. I always forget the abbreviation, what it means actually. But yes, they have managed to bring infiltrators into Pokrovsk, which had to be fought by the Ukrainians, because there are also reports that the Ukrainian units are very low on infantry. So yes, this is a very dire situation, and I think we will soon see the fall of Pokrovsk, actually, because either the fall of Pokrovsk, or I don't know, the Ukrainians have to conduct a huge counter-conduct, which I don't really see happening, to relieve at least the east side of Pokrovsk from all the pressure, so they can actually supply it properly.
Yeah, so one of the main problems is that the key logistics routes through, you can see those 2 roads very easily, right? And especially the northern one was more or less safe for a long time. Dobropilya was a heavy logistical center for the defense of Pokrovsk, and it seems like the Russians were waiting for an opportunity where they would be able to both send kind of medium range FPV drones and also some Molnias, etc., to Dobropilya, but then also be able to hammer the city with Cubs, right? Because when they suddenly came within this kind of medium range FPV, so not like, you know, they don't need to go 35 kilometers with FPVs anymore to reach Dobropilya. Then suddenly we saw several Cub strikes and a lot of FPV action in Dobropilya.
Yep, it's
that situation, the Ukrainians would either need to take back some of this northern territory there, the flank, northeastern flank, yes, in my opinion, or do basically the same as the Russians do when they go forward, make the area completely impossible to to operate in. You don't need to necessarily reoccupy it, but you need to make the grounds basically impossible to stay in, which would be difficult. You need an immense amount of firepower to do that.
Yes, I mean, this is actually quite a problem with the way that Ukraine is conducting the building of the fortifications, in my opinion. They don't really remove tree cover when they have the chance to. Like, we see a lot of times that all the, obviously the small plants, the bushes, etc., they will regrow quite fast. But if we remove the tree cover, the Russians would have had a way harder time to move through a lot of this area here and to actually advance towards the Ukrainian positions. But yes, I mean, I don't know why exactly this hasn't been any focus for the Ukrainians, or at least it didn't seem to be any focus, because if you retroactively want to remove tree cover, it's quite a lot more work to do it with bombs than with chainsaws.
Yeah, the Russians are doing this when they advance. They basically hammer all the terrain lines with so much artillery and cob fire that, yeah.
We have seen this actually in Sumy quite heavily, where I don't know, I remember which tree line exactly it was, but the Russians have, like, they are using an insane amount of airstrikes there, and like really heavily striking the like singular tree lines have had like dozens of Russian bomb hits, which is quite the insane number. Generally, the fighting up here in Sumy is obviously also still going very strong. This is actually an area where Ukraine isn't doing nearly as bad as anywhere else. I mean, this is actually one of the few areas where they are advancing, at least somewhere, at least near they retook Tivka, and I think also Andrivka, and but this is actually really important for them to do so the Russians don't get nearer to Sumy, which would be a huge headache for Ukraine, because Sumy is obviously also one of the main population centers for Ukraine, and they can't really allow the Russians to get any closer than they already are here.
Did Ukraine relocate a large amount of forces there, or introduce new units?
Not really, as far as I could see. I think the Russian units that are there finally, fell victim to the attrition that they have been facing over the last months. This is the bigger reason, I think, but I don't know for sure. But as far as I've seen, they actually moved away some units from Sumy. I mean, they have heavily used the assault regiments there. The 225th, for example, has been conducting a lot of counterattacks, especially around Kindrativka. But about the brigades, they moved away the 36th. They moved away the 36th Marine Brigade, for example. They moved it down south to help here. Also, the 82nd Assault Brigade is now here to help in this area. So I wouldn't say actually that they rather moved away some brigades, which makes it all the more remarkable that they're holding the line as well as they're doing right now. But as I said, I think this is also due to the attrition the Russians has faced, because they have taken huge losses within Kursk and now also within Sumy. A really interesting detail that Imi told me, for example, I think he has spotted one vehicle loss in Sumy or zero. I don't remember exactly if it was 1 or 0. 1 or 0, which is very unusual because basically all the Russian assaults in this area are only being done by foot, or they are using basically no armor. Sorry, not vehicle losses, no armor losses. They're basically using 0 armor in this area, and are only trying to advance by foot or by very light vehicles, and they are therefore taking quite heavy manpower losses. This is also actually reflected in the Russian vehicle losses, which have been dropping a lot over the last months. I mean, especially in the armor category.
Have you seen a difference over the last, I would say, 2 months? Any changes in the amounts of sleepy Russians that you'd identified?
As I've said before, I don't really do. Sorry, I have to think for a second. I don't really count the MIAs as much. Like, I don't really count them, but from my feeling, yes, they have increased. Basically, what has also happened, units that haven't really lost any soldiers before are now suddenly losing them and like are being introduced and used more heavily. For example, the Russians moved away the remaining parts of the 40th Naval Infantry Brigade from down here, which had been fighting around Komar and Bahatir. They moved them all up to Sumy, and then used basically the last Marine Naval Infantry Brigade that they had in reserve, namely the 336, which now has to be fighting near Komar and Tolstoy, etc. So what I am seeing is a very high intensity across the front line. As you know, also near Kamyansk, the Russians are now fighting way more than they've done, or actually also around Robotine, they tried to reach Mala Tokmakh and are also using the units there more. So yes, in this regard, I can see that there's more losses than before. Some detail that's actually also interesting. Units that I thought were forever lost, namely I think 2 of the Russian regiments that were fighting in Avdiivka, and basically were fighting in Avdiivka, and afterwards they were like not showing up anymore at all, and now like suddenly showing up again. And I think they have since been restaffed and are now reintroduced to the front line. Yes.
Interesting. Yeah. Are there any more questions from the panel to Gesh, or do you have any more observations that you think are interesting to share?
Just in general, the Russians have maybe a small point about the Russian approach to drone units and drone usage. They have also, I mean, similar to the Ukrainians actually, which formed the unmanned systems forces. The Russians now also try to centralize parts of the drone troops, so to say. I mean, the most famous example is obviously Rubicon, which is I think roughly a brigade-sized unit, which is only focused on drones. They're doing interceptions. They're doing FPV attacks. They're doing long-range strikes with Molnias, and they've recently also been spotted using unmanned surface vehicles in Crimea. So it's quite a diverse drone unit. But the Russians have also started to expand their own drone units. We have now seen the first case of one of the Russian units having, one of the Russian divisions outside of the VDV having a drone battalion, namely the Russian 90th Tank Division, which is fighting in this area. They're more like this area. They are pushing Yorikove, towards Novopavlivka. They have now also formed a drone battalion, which is, I think, the first of its kind outside of the VDV, which had drone battalions way earlier. And also a small structural point, but this time about the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians have now started to make proper units for drone interceptions. So they are mostly platoons for the ground forces brigades, or all the brigades, they're mostly platoon sized. Those platoons, they are like specialized drone interceptor platoons, which are then placed either under the drone battalion or more often under the anti-aircraft battalion of the brigade. So they are now like more streamlining those units, or basically more properly integrating them into the unit structure. So it's now a very, like, as you had before a recon platoon, you now also have a drone interceptor unit, which didn't exist at all like 1 year ago, or a bit more than 1 year ago. I think the first interception started early 2024, March or something like that. 2024, we had the first interceptions, and since then, like in the last 1.5 years, we have now come to this point. Also, about the structure, the Ukrainian anti-aircraft missile regiments have now nearly all the ones that are subordinated to the ground forces, I have to emphasize that point, have now started forming interceptor battalions. So the main focus for the interceptions will be for the anti-aircraft missile regiments. And quite recently, okay, I have to dig deep again. As I see, I actually have a lot to talk about.
That's good.
So the Ukrainians have an internal ranking for drone units.
Yes.
And quite recently, it was the first time that an anti-aircraft missile regiment was included in such ranking. The thing is, this very regiment doesn't really post much footage, so the reasonable assumption is that this regiment is responsible for Shahed interceptions, which have been, for the most part, quite handled quite secretive. So the Russians don't fully know how they are conducted. So yeah, this is also quite promising development, and I hope that the Ukrainians will manage to fight the Shahed threat with the new interceptor drones and to make a very cost-effective answer to this problem with the interceptors. And because I have mentioned it before, all those drone and interceptor battalions have been formed under ground forces anti-aircraft missile regiments, because the Ukrainian Air Force is still quite defunct. Most people don't know that, or who are not deep into the topic, but actually the Ukrainian Air Force hasn't had an actual commander for a very long time now, and I think only today or yesterday the acting commander of the Ukrainian Air Force has finally been appointed the commander of the Air Force, and I really hope that they will do some innovations soon and change some approaches. So because it has been, as far as I can see, the Ukrainian Air Force hasn't really been a place of, like, I don't know, they are often lacking behind structural changes, for example, after the ground forces, etc. They are not really that innovative, but obviously again, I don't have full insight, but it's just a feeling of an outside observer.
Thank you. So, have you noticed any big movements after Robert Brovdi Magyar took over the unmanned systems forces? He was talking very heavily about creating this wall of drones and basically what I think he called a dead man zone, where no person was allowed to move. Have you seen any changes in the units following that?
Honestly, not really, but I think this is a better question for the people actually analyzing the footage. And that's not something I really do. I don't watch that many videos. I focus on other parts. So hard to say for me. What they have also announced was that they will try to hunt the Russian drone teams a lot more. And I'm also curious how, I think this will take some time to really take effect and to really show on the battlefield. And then I'm really curious how, if they manage to properly suppress the Russian drone teams to instill fear into them, so they are not so I think the focus went from more strikes on logistical lines to more strikes on the Russian drone teams. But I still have to see how this plays out. So I can't really see anything about this stuff. Sorry, no.
Thank you. Well, that will be an interesting development if you see changes or in the patterns of MIAs.
I had some UAV operators. Let's say it like that.
Yeah. Well, that's already an interesting detail.
Yep. All right.
So, question from Marino. It's maybe not completely related, but we can talk about it. How are the Shaheds launched? From multiple random trucks in different fields, or all from designated launch spots? So we've observed a little bit of this, but I don't think we're going to publish anything.
Yep. Also can't talk about it.
It's a sensitive topic, but there's a lot of observation being done in this field, and the Russians are trying to be innovative, but they are also doing mistakes. So, yeah, let's say that the launch complexes are enormous, and
Yep,
to be able to launch 700 drones in one night, they need to be quite substantial. So, yeah.
Great.
That's the only answer I have to that question.
I will stop my screen sharing if there's not any more questions that are specific to this.
So Kellen actually asked earlier before you came on this question, which is relevant to the discussion we had. Your general thoughts on a drone duel between Ukraine and Russia. Who has the advantage now? Seems like Russia is making big improvements with jet Shaheds and production too. So let's comment first on the tactical groups. So FPV drones, bomber drones, etc. I would say that Ukraine is still quite far ahead when it comes to especially tactics, organizational structures, but also innovation and technology. The Russians seems to be copying the Ukrainian both tech-wise and tactics, which is not good, of course, but I would say that the Ukrainians are quite far ahead, especially on the tactical drones. What do you think, Kesh?
Yeah, I think especially when you see the use of bomber drones, the Ukrainians are especially far ahead in this field. They have a use of bomber drones and to great effect as well. But yeah, as I said before, this tactical stuff only very surface level from my side.
Yeah, but my impression is that the Russians are copying tactics from the Ukrainians, and unfortunately, it's very damaging.
Yeah, I mean they also copied the Ukrainian drone interceptor stuff. I mean the Ukrainians were also for a long time the only ones really doing them like this, and now the Russians are also trying to properly set up a structure for drone interceptions. They have doing it a lot, especially around Kostiantynivka. They have intercepted a ton of Ukrainian reconnaissance drones. So yeah.
They're still very far behind Ukraine, and I think that will remain as such, mainly also because of technical limitations. The Russians don't really have a big industry on counter UAS radars. They have some radars that would be able to see small UAVs, but most of their traditional radars are not optimized to that. So that will be a big limiting factor for them, but they are able to do some. So yeah.
I actually see another question in the chat. I mean, it's directed to Gao, but I think I can also answer it. Patriot Fire Unit doesn't mean it's a battery. It's not just a launcher; it's the whole battery. That's basically what a fire unit is. But yes.
Yeah, the fire unit is the actual equipment that composes the battery. When the battery is the actual unit operating the fire unit. So
yeah. And about the Gepards, I can't answer. So this has to be answered by Gao.
I wanted to answer the last part of the question because Kellen is also talking about jet Shaheds and production levels, and yes, of course, it's a very notable. The rate of the Shahed attacks is insane, and it's been growing a lot. I think a couple of nights ago we had a statement from the Ukrainian MOD that the Russians used 12 jet Shahed drones. That can go 500 kilometers an hour. I saw report by the BBC saying that they were supersonic Shaheds. That's obviously not true. They are subsonic, but they're closing in on the speeds of a cruise missile. These drones are more of a problem because it's very difficult to shoot these down by ground fire. I'm sure you can do it with a Gepard or a similar system, but that would mean they will have to be within closer range, and the AAA units, the mobile fire groups, will have very big difficulties shooting them down.
Ukraine is big.
Yep. But I have my doubts that this will be the norm. I think they will have always a smaller portion of these kind of drones if they set them into large scale production.
Yes, it would be interesting to find out what the cost difference is for Russia, but we will have to wait until something is leaked about this.
Yep. Marino has an off-topic question, which I'm not able to answer. I'm so sorry. Ukraine builds these Sherp off-road vehicles with huge tires that are also capable of swimming. Why not these? You see these in militaries as well, because I can answer the last part. Well, anything that moves in water moves slowly in a flat surface, which means it's very easy to observe, and which means you're an easy target.
Funny story is also when Russians try to cross a river.
Yeah, even a small river makes you move so much slower, and it's so much easier to spot. So, I mean, it's a nice capability to have, and if you absolutely need it, it can be crucial. But I would not want to see Ukraine start doing any big amphibious operations, please. No.
I mean, this little canal has stopped the Russians for a long time to make any movement here.
Yeah.
I think this tells you enough. This is like a really, really, really small water area. So, yes.
Yep. Okay. I think that's it. Maybe we can move back to the Patriot question if Gao is around.
I will stop sharing my screen.
The first part of the question you already answered, right? Then, okay, moving on to the next section. Germany has never agreed to deliver 110 Gepards. I think you confuse the overall number of Gepards and cheetahs Ukraine will receive in total, and only part of that. Most of them are provided by Germany, but some of them are provided by the US. So Germany has agreed to deliver, and we have already completely delivered 52 Gepards. And then we have up to 60 cheetahs, which is a different version of the Gepard, similar but still different, and which were bought in Jordan jointly by the US and Germany. Germany is going to finance, for all we know, 15 of them. The US is going to finance the rest. We don't know how many, could be up to 45. And yeah, and with the ammunition, so we had, I believe, something like 60, 70,000 or so in the first round. Then the German government, together with Rheinmetall, managed to actually restart the ammunition production in 2023. And also in 2023, the first deliveries happened. The first 150,000 rounds were already delivered, and then they switched ammunition types. Now they are delivering the air defense ammunition with which shatters, as far as I know. And yeah, deliveries are ongoing, and I believe in January, I think it was in early January 2025, they announced that the German government has financed another contract in addition to the 300,000 rounds. They're financing another, I think it was 180,000 rounds. So there's constant ammunition coming and coming and coming and coming. I don't think anyone has to worry about capital ammunition. And if they have to worry about capital ammunition, then in my opinion, it's due to a production problem, not due to lack of orders, because we've, as I said, delivered 70, 60, 70, 80,000 rounds and have contracted another 480,000. And yeah, shouldn't be an issue.
Good to hear. So, Marino asks, is Sumy in danger in the near future? Like Russians getting into artillery range? I would say that fear is pretty much over because the offensive there completely stalled, and Ukraine even managed to push them back in quite actually significantly. Not a huge amount of territory, but important. So I wouldn't say that's something I'm worried about right now, but never say never. The Russians suddenly change objectives, and yeah.
Sumy is shelled a lot. Like, there's, I want to say reports of around 100 incidents per week in Sumy, something like that. But
Oh yeah.
I don't know. In terms of being invaded, I don't know about that. But there's definitely shellings going on.
But I think the Russians wanted to try and get in range with medium range artillery, which would be quite devastating for Sumy. But yeah, they send a lot of drones there, Molnia drones and darts and Shaheds basically every day. It's really difficult for the territorial defense and these mobile fire groups to stop them because the range is very short, right? So it's not easy in Sumy. And there's also a lot of incidents now popping up of human safari incidents where drones are flying into civilian buildings and vehicles. Yep. Did anyone see any more questions that we didn't answer?
No,
that's all of
I
them.
don't think so.
But Joseph, you had an extra bit, didn't you?
Well, I was going to ask Mr. Germinate about this, but it sounds like he doesn't know much about it. It's kind of a new story. It was published by The Insider, which is a publication that Colby contributes to on occasion. But yeah, apparently a German firm had is a machine tool manufacturing company called Spinner in Germany was raided by the authorities for potential violations of sanctions against Russia. They were said to have sold approximately 20 high precision manufacturing machines worth around 5.5 million euros to Russia in direct violation of EU sanctions. So just wondering if like the German press covered that at all, or if there's any more information about it from the German side, but it sounds like no, eh?
I mean, if I spotted that correctly in the few seconds the article was shown, they quoted, so that's not an insider exclusive, they quoted from the Süddeutsche Zeitung, yeah, so it's a German newspaper which wrote about it, so it was covered, but I actually haven't read anything in the German news about it, so it wasn't surely not broadly covered.
Lock him up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All I can say to that, really, without having knowledge, is that you hear that from time to time that they're doing investigations, raiding people and companies and all that kind of stuff. They're working on it. It's of course bad that this stuff still happens, but at least from a German perspective, I would definitely say that the German authorities are behind it and are actually working against it, and they're yeah, that's all I can say.
You know, the only way we can stop these things from happening is if people actually go behind bars, because that will stop other companies considering, or that still haven't been caught doing it. They will then probably cease their operations, because if there are financial consequences for the company, sure, I mean, they might stop, but likely not, right? So we need to see people actually behind bars.
No, we sentenced to prison time already.
Okay, that's good.
I think they should just have the company forced to pay double whatever they did. So in this case, 5.5 million, 11 million to like Ukraine, just direct aid to Ukraine.
Yeah. In addition to the CEO going behind bars, in my opinion. But yeah, there's no excuse if you're the CEO of a company to say that you didn't know. It's your responsibility to know that you don't breach sanctions. It's not. You're not only punishable if you actively try to breach sanctions. It's also if someone that you're selling to are doing some nefarious operations with third-party countries. It's your responsibility to stop. So
Yeah,
it's not just Germany, of course.
Yeah, don't worry. Just to give one example, because I say we have to sentence people behind bars. So there's one, for example, a 54-year-old German was no, sorry, a 59-year-old German was sentenced to 6 years and 9 months behind bars for delivering drone parts between January 2020 and May 2023 to Ukraine. It was a total of 120,000 parts in 54 cases. Yeah, and he was
To
sentenced
Ukraine or to Russia?
To Russia. No, he wouldn't get sentenced if it was deliveries to Ukraine. No, oh, just you killed me. No, it was to Russia, and he was sentenced to 6 years and 9 months, and his wife was sentenced because she helped him. Was sentenced to 1 year and 1 year and something on probation, as far as I know, and both of them have the German as well as the Russian citizenship.
Understood.
So it happens. I must say it's really not really covered in general news, but I read it from time to time, like every couple of months. Police is raiding somewhere, people being sentenced to hefty fines or prison time, and yeah, we're working on it. I know it's an issue, but we're working on it. And I just want to say, I don't want to find excuses, but every time I see like Ukrainian publications or international media publications saying we found this and this and this parts in Russian drones or cruise missiles or something, it feels like there's 1 or 2 parts from Germany and like 80 parts from China and the US in it. And yeah, so I don't think that Germany is really a big issue. From what I've seen, talking to Daniela and others, it's like an issue when we're delivering machinery for the production of artillery shells and all that kind of stuff to Russia, but actually parts for cruise missiles, drones and stuff, Germany is just a minor share.
No, but I think this is because Germany is actually trying to stop it or to hinder it.
Yeah, could be. I don't know. I don't have any intel to share with the public, so yeah, just my observations.
Okay, I think one last question, and then we'll head off. So Yorona asks, is anyone aware of public data points on direct energy experiments, Dragonfire, HCL for air defense yet? In my opinion, the current situation would seem almost ideal for some secretive limited testing. And I don't know, never seen any data points, at least.
I mean, I've seen a Russian propaganda piece that they want to introduce an indirect energy weapon, and they think they have some prototype already. They are using it in Kursk, I think. It's like some time ago that I've seen it. I don't know all the details, but yes, there has been this one thing at least.
All the kids coming out of Kursk the next few years will have 5 legs and 7 arms.
It's
Yeah.
just a laser. It's just a laser, guys.
Okay.
And I just wanna add to that, because of this kind of questions, it's like if some Western firm or company or whatever would test something secretive here in Ukraine, nobody of us would actually tell that on stream. So it's yeah.
Yeah, but I haven't seen any public data points. I've seen lots of statements, lots of reports on new technology being developed, but I haven't seen any data points or field testing results or anything like that being published.
Yeah, I think the Israelis claim they tested some directed energy systems in the last recent exchange with Iran, but I don't think they released any numbers or figures or anything significant like that.
But what we can say is that there are definitely a very large portion of the Shahed drones that are being reported intercepted by the Ukrainian MOD that are due to electronic warfare. And I think that's definitely very interesting. And who knows, maybe some of that is due to direct energy weapons. I would assume if they actually included it in some sort of numbers, it would be there. So yeah.
One thing I would say is, number one, the Ukrainians are like going real hard at developing weapons. Like they have, I want to say, like multiple missile systems in development. Like we've seen, all of a sudden they had old prototypes of missiles, and then they went from that to like working missiles by 2024, 2025. And they were quite secretive about it. So I think all that to say, like, Ukraine's pretty good at keeping secrets, and like when they're working pretty hard at like developing new weapons. So I wouldn't be surprised if in a year or something, like I've said many times during this war, maybe they'll come up with some interesting ways to do this, but we probably won't see that by the end of this war. It'll be the next war or whatever, and then by the next year it's all happening on scale on the front line. So who knows? But I think it's enough to say that the Ukrainians are like developing a lot of interesting technology, and they're really like gung-ho about it, and they're really secretive, so we might see something surprising.
Yep. Okay. I think we're gonna have to let Gesh click on, and close out the stream soon.
Gesh is broken.
What do you mean?
Don't worry, man.
I'm working
Don't
already.
worry.
I don't know.
I know. It's great.
Oh, sorry, I'm clicking too loud.
No. I like it. we appreciate it, Gesh.
I actually do I know it's completely off topic, but I absolutely do the same. It's like I always use the pressing the middle mouse, and I always have to select my text multiple times when I'm actually reading it. I find it it's like a super nasty tick of me.
Yeah.
Clicking your pen.
Yeah, it's like I'm not zooming forward or like scrolling forward or backwards or something. I always have to click it so the mouse pointer changes, and then I can freely scroll up and down. And yeah, I don't know. I just understand that click, 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 click. It's completely the same for me.
Gotta get that APM up. Okay, so of course we had a really big broadcast today. Thanks, of course, to our special guest, Daria, for joining us and discussing a very important Ukrainian organization, Helping to Leave. Definitely check that website out, see what they're up to. It's a very important cause that we at Tochnyi are we feel very strongly about. Thank you, of course, to Gesh for stopping by and providing a new report on what's going on in the front line. We really appreciate that. I know people are very interested in that topic. So thank you, Gesh, for stopping by. Thank you, of course, to Stanimir, as always, for his report on the Russian economy. Thanks to German Aid to Ukraine. Thanks to Erlen for hosting the stream. And I have to thank myself. I'm obligated to do so contractually. Yeah, of course, thanks to chat for all your great questions live. We really appreciate it. It's important to us to know kind of what you guys want to know about. And we do our best to kind of, answer all of your questions. That's one of the reasons we do this. So thanks so much for your questions and for your participation. Thanks for watching, of course, and thanks for people who watch after the broadcast goes live. We know not everyone can make it for the live show, so we appreciate you watching after the fact. You guys are welcome to put any questions you have or comments in the YouTube comments. We'll do our best to look through them and give you some kind of answer. So with that, we will see everyone next week, same time, 2100 Sunday, Kyiv time. Slava Ukraini.
Slava.
On behalf of the brave.